keep hearing Republicans babbling that, well, these tax credits weren't permanent. They happened during COVID. And I just feel like, so what? If they help people, why do we want to go back to how it was before COVID? If they worked and they were functional, we want to keep it. Listen, I was born and raised on welfare. I had Medicaid when I was a kid. Like I know what that's like. And that was the Reagan years, right? And Reagan was slashing. So why do you want to go back to when it was hell for people? That's the narrative I don't get. They keep saying, well, it wasn't permanent before. Who cares? Life is about growing. And if you're an elected official, you want to help people when you find something that works, correct?
That's absolutely correct. And you know what's interesting too, they keep saying this was a COVID era program. And while it's certainly the case that initially the Affordable Care Act tax credits were put into the American Rescue Plan, which was the legislation designed to help pull us out of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that the economy had shut down and people were struggling all across the country, and Democrats needed to step in after Donald Trump and Republicans blew it and entirely mismanaged the whole COVID-19 situation. But then, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which passed in August of 2022, right, which was legislation designed to bring down the cost of living in America, the Affordable Care Act tax credits were extended for an additional 3 years. And that's what brings us to this moment. And so the Republicans, of course, voted against it then, even though it's their constituents who are, of course, benefiting along with everyday Americans across the country. In fact, Clay, as you know, the states that are most impacted adversely by a failure to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits are all run by Republicans. We're talking about West Virginia, Wyoming, Alaska, Tennessee, Mississippi, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Those are the 10 states most adversely affected. So this is not a partisan fight for us. We're fighting for all Americans across the country. I think 45% of the people who benefit from the Affordable Care Act tax credits are registered Republicans, 35% are Democrats, and the balance are independents. This is an American issue, and yet we can't get Republicans to do the right thing. We're going to keep fighting. We filed a discharge petition. Every single member of the House Democratic Caucus, 214, have signed that discharge petition, which would trigger an up or down vote on extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits. All we need are 4 Republicans in the House to join us. There's 220 of them. All we need are 4, and we're going to continue to press our case.
If the 7 Democrats and 1 independent hadn't caved during the shutdown, would you have more leverage right now?
Well, listen, I mean, I think that those 8 individuals are going to have to continue to explain themselves, and we'll see what happens on the Senate floor, I think in just 2 days, where there will be a vote to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. I do believe that every single Senate Democrat is going to support that legislation, including the 8. But the question, of course, will be, can we get a handful of Republicans to join us in the Senate so we can get this done? That said, as House Democrats, our position was we're in this fight until we win this fight. And winning this fight means extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits, but it also means driving down the high cost of living across the board. Donald Trump made this big grand promise that he was going to lower costs on day one. Costs aren't going down, they're going up. Housing costs through the roof, electricity prices through the roof, grocery costs out of control. And now we've got this Republican healthcare crisis, which is a total disaster, including but not limited to, as it relates to the Affordable Care Act tax credits and the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. So in the House, we're going to continue to fight hard to get this done in advance of the end of the year. And then, of course, we'll have a new appropriations battle that we're going to be waging in terms of the expiration of the current spending bill, which will take place on January 30th.
But did their cave, because on these airwaves, folks called in outraged over it, has it weakened your negotiating power in the House?
Well, in the House, listen, our position remains the same. We remain firmly committed, and we're going to continue to call out our Republican colleagues. Mike Johnson had a presentation earlier today in the House Republican conference meeting where he presented all manner of random different proposals to try to deal with the healthcare crisis that they've created, and they continue to refuse. Now, you know, the past is the past. We're going to continue to focus on the future. That's my job as House Democratic leader. But I will say, look, we need complete and total Democratic unity as we move forward if we're going to get to a place where we can resolve this healthcare crisis.
Jeffries, I'm on these airwaves 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. And one of the things that I hear is that people feel like Democrats aren't fighting hard enough. And some folks even call in and they say that you come across as weak. That's what I keep hearing. What's your response to some Democratic voters who feel like that you're coming across as quote unquote weak?
Well, I guess my view is that, listen, we are in a more is more environment. And of course, because of the level of extremism that's being unleashed on the American people, folks are going to be unsettled. At the same period of time, what is clear to me is that we started the year and the obituary for the Democratic Party had been written. It's over. They don't know how to win elections. They don't know how to push back. They can't get stuff done. We're ending the year. Donald Trump is the most unpopular president at this point in time in American history. Gallup just had him at 36%. We pushed back aggressively against the one big ugly bill. Every single House Democrat, every single Senate Democrat stood together, opposed it. Of course, Republicans were able to pass it. It's 20 or 25 points underwater. The American people know it's a fraudulent, harmful piece of legislation. That doesn't just happen. Democrats forcefully push back against it, and now Republicans can't even talk about their own signature bill. And perhaps most importantly, starting in late January, when we won a special election for a state Senate seat in Iowa that Donald Trump had just actually won by 21 points, the Democrat flipped that seat by 4 points. It was a 25-point turnaround. Going through the Wisconsin special election for the state Supreme Court race, in a state that Donald Trump had literally just won a few months ago, Wisconsin is a swing state, 50-50. We won that race by 11 points. We win in special elections all across the country. Of course, in November, it was a decisive blue electoral wave across America, up and down the ballot, including, of course, in New Jersey, in New York, in Virginia, Prop 50 in California, winning statewide races for the first time in 20 years in Georgia, ending the supermajority in the Mississippi State Senate. I mean, the facts at this point speak for themselves. Last night, we won the mayoralty in Miami for the first time in almost 30 years. And a Democratic candidate who ran on affordability, which is the common narrative and agenda that we set at the beginning of this year, actually prevailed by 18 points. And so I think we recognize that the environment is such that there's a new outrage every day that we have to rise up and push back against, and people are going to be unsettled. But at a certain point, like, the facts kind of have to be the facts as it relates to how we started and how we're ending the year, which clearly, foundationally, is America is moving in the right direction. They understand this guy and the Republicans have been a disaster. And one of the most significant ways that we can actually get this thing turned around and begin to end this national nightmare is to flip control of the House of Representatives, which I'm confident we will do in under a year.
From AIPAC. I know the majority of your donations come from small donors. I get that. But I guess my question is, why even take money from AIPAC when other Democrats don't at all? Do you have to because of the way that money's in politics right now? Why even take a dollar from AIPAC when there are some Democrats like Jasmine Crockett who don't? What's your response to that?
Well, it's a great question. And I think, as you pointed out, first of all, in the last election cycle, as House Democratic leader and the need to raise money and then contribute money to others, right? I raised $22 million. 97% of that money came from people who overwhelmingly were giving $10, $15, $20. I think my average contribution in the last election cycle was $35. And so what continues to perplex me is that, when it comes to AIPAC as a political action committee, like every other political action committee, AIPAC can only contribute $5,000 per cycle. $5,000 in the primary, $5,000 for the general election per year. I think that's it. Now, certainly there are people who support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state, as I do. Doesn't mean Israel's perfect. No country is, but I support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state. So there are pro-Israel supporters in the district that I represent, significant parts of the district, certainly in southern Brooklyn, and people across the country who support the fact that I support Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state and our commitment to Israel's safety and security. At the same period of time, I've been very clear that the things that have gone on in Gaza need to change dramatically. I'm thankful that there's a ceasefire. We have to continue to surge humanitarian aid into Gaza. We have to make sure that Gaza is reconstructed. We have to find a path toward a just and lasting peace. And that means, at the end of the day, in my view, a two-state solution. Safe and secure Israel living side by side in peace and prosperity to a Palestinian state where the Palestinian people can finally achieve their goals of dignity and self-determination. That's been my position. And I don't think that position is inconsistent with the overwhelming majority of people that I represent in the 8th Congressional District in Brooklyn, or for that matter, the American people. So there are folks who have an agenda for whatever the reason, and that's just part of the reality of serving in public office. People are going to take shots. People are going to take things out of context and try to weaponize issues where they can. I'm just going to continue to make my case as best I can to the American people, and certainly to the folks that I represent in Brooklyn, that my 2-year employment contract should be renewed, because I continue to be focused on making their life better.
But if it's just 5,000 per election cycle, the way that you broke it down, then again, why even take it? Because some people are refusing across the board, whether it's corporate PAC money or AIPAC. If it's just 5,000, why even take it?
Well, making that decision, but listen, I've been clear in my views as it relates to PAC money. I don't take money from private prisons. Haven't taken money from big oil. I don't take money from these special interests that I think have corroded the situation in Washington, D.C. for decades. I believe in Israel's right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state. If people want to attack me because I received contributions from AIPAC and want to ignore every other aspect of my record, then they're free to do that. And ultimately, look, we just work for the American people. It's the American people who got to make a determination. Is he working on my behalf or not? I think it's insulting when some people suggest that contributions from anyone, particularly given the enormity of resources that we're raising generally as members of Congress, are actually shaping the decisions that you make. It's not. We're making decisions based on what we think is in the best interest of the people that we represent, and we'll continue to do that. And then we got to make our case to the American people.
So wait, Leo Jeffries, you're telling me so just so folks understand, and I know AIPAC isn't quite corporate PAC money, but when politicians take corporate PAC money or AIPAC money, we shouldn't feel like that has any connection to how they govern, or there's no connection to that whatsoever. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I certainly think that's the case. The overwhelming majority of people, at least I can speak for Democrats, are raising money from individuals, as you pointed out. Like
you're saying it's a small fraction.
It's a small fraction. Certainly, I can speak to my own personal situation, but this is all public. Like this is not right. This is all public, so people can try to line up the resources that we have to necessarily raise to be able to communicate with our constituents in a situation where we run every 2 years, and then just make the decision right? Is this particular individual fighting for me or not? The overwhelming majority of people, I believe, will continue to make the decision that members of the House Democratic Caucus are actually fighting for them on the issues that matter. We just saw that in a 43-day government shutdown where Democrats were standing up to protect the Affordable Care Act tax credits, the health, the safety, and the well-being of the American people. And Republicans were the ones who continue to do the bidding of the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, have zero interest in actually enacting policies that make life better for the American people. So, we're all an open book. And I think at the end of the day, that's the beautiful part of representative democracy.
It's up to the voters, absolutely. Before you go, you said 4 Republicans, going back to healthcare. What can my audience do? Should they make phone calls? What can my very active audience do to see that, God willing, something happens before January? What can we do?
I think you're absolutely correct that, as John Lewis would often say, show up, stand up, speak up on the issues that matter for what you know to be right. And we know that extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits is the right thing for the Congress to do at this moment so that more than 20 million people don't get jammed up. And folks should identify their members of Congress, identify their senators. And if this is an issue that's important to you, reach out to them, show up to their office, advocate, petition the government as part of the First Amendment, right? It's not just the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of expression. It's the right to petition the government to demand policies that you believe are in the best interest of the American people. And it is certainly the case that extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits is the right thing to do for everyday Americans.